This is the Chapter 3 Stigma Podcast. This podcast was created to be there for any individual who feels like they are at a low point in life and are confused, seemingly alone, and helpless in their situation. I am a recovering alcoholic, and I felt this way too, until I sat across the table from another addict who shared his story and made me realize that I was not alone in my struggles. My life was saved by this realization, and I hope to help anyone struggling by sharing my story to show you that you are not alone and that life can contain unbelievable riches and meaning. Welcome. I am glad you are here.
Hey folks, welcome to another episode of the Chapter 3 Stigma Podcast. I have back-to-back guests on, I think for the first time ever, on the podcast. So with me today to reflect back and talk about a moment, an opportunity of celebration will be my wife, Alyssa. So Alyssa, do you want to say hello?
Hello. I'm back. I want to first start by saying if you're listening to this and you haven't listened to last week's episode, that it would be a great one to go back and listen to. It is an incredible story. I found myself basically crying, folding laundry as I was listening to the podcast because it's very raw. It's very insightful, truly, to listen to Kyle's interview with Eric and Ben and just their, shared grief experiences, yet very different experiences. So I think there's a lot of wisdom to be gained from last week's episode. So just personal plug that it would be a good one to go back and listen to if you haven't already.
Yeah. And thank you for letting me sneak away on our family vacation to do that.
Yes, of course.
To do that recording and have that conversation. It was very powerful. Eric and Ben are both incredible human beings, and it was really I learned a lot from it just with regards to, everyone basically is going on some sort of healing or like integration journey. And I think in a large part, like that is actually what I hope to focus on here and talk about with regards to our relationship. So as I was sitting down and thinking about how I wanted to kind of measure and recognize the 18-month anniversary of me entering recovery, which will be November 14th when this podcast episode releases. I couldn't really think of a better way than having you on because obviously you have been there from the very start when I was started struggling with alcohol, like in a very serious way. And you stayed committed and loyal to me and you believed in me during periods when I didn't believe in myself. And you also just believed in us. But there's been a lot of growth and learning from our perspective, each as individuals and as a couple. And I was just reflecting back, and basically every time it's really impossible to separate out my journey and our journey of recovery and integrating that into our lives from Lucy and her story. But I really did want to carve out some time to try to focus more so on what you and I have been doing as individuals and as a couple since I went into rehab to really sort out and figure out who we are as individuals and what the discovery of that new identity and like purpose in life means for us as a couple and for our relationship going forward. I've said it numerous times, but it's like one thing I realized coming out of rehab, and I'm glad I realized it before leaving rehab, was I had the assumption that every single relationship in my life was going to change or be altered in some manner. And obviously this relationship that we have is the most important one in my life and in our lives. So there's an obvious focus, and we've been very deliberate about it in the time after rehab, because I know just my recollection and my perception of you visiting when I was in rehab, it was like I could tell that you, I don't know if nervous was the right word, but it was like you were apprehensive. You didn't know if this was going to stick. And it's one thing to see and hear from me and hear the confidence in my voice, but it's another thing to see it played out.
Yeah, I think it's just I think hesitant or apprehensive is a good way of putting it, because, I mean, truly it was, we've been there before. We've been through the periods of time where you had this confidence and I felt like, well, maybe this time it'll be different. And so I think there's just some hesitation or apprehension in that moment or in that period of time of like, yes, will this stick? Is this another game, I guess you could say, or, what's the reality here? Because obviously my reality had been duped multiple times.
Yep. Yeah, with the lying
Mhm.
and manipulation, for sure. And I think a good place to start is just kind of ground on your experience when I was in rehab, because in particular, the place that I went into, they actually had a family program. And I actually think this is a really powerful way to start off and kind of help align the key relationships in your life by going through something like this. So do you want to just give kind of like a high level overview of what that family programming was like, if you can even remember
Yeah,
it,
I'm
just
trying to
because
think
there's...
So, well, I mean, obviously, like a main component of it was having the visiting hours and, being able to come see you. That was something that not every facility offered the same way. And so I think it was really great. It was just once a week. It wasn't offered multiple times a week like some of the other facilities we looked at were. And then in addition, they had on Saturdays, they had educational meetings where it was all through Zoom, and they would have various topics. They kind of flowed through the same 4 topics. So because people were entering rehab at different times, you would not necessarily be starting on topic number 1. Like I think we rolled in at topic 2. I can't remember. We rolled in. It wasn't at number 1 though, and so we all hopped on as best as we could. We being myself, and then Kyle's siblings, parents, and then my sibling and parents. And you could ask questions. There was some slideshows, some education. There was one where it was a panel of of alumni, I guess you'd call them. Yeah, alumni that had been through your program. And so it was very helpful to have that. And then additionally, they did provide, resources for Al-Anon, and trying to think what else. There was check-ins with the counselor, where it was,
with my counselor,
with your counselor.
That I was
so it was early on just any information that we wanted to provide that might aid in your recovery. We being, again, just me, but I'm saying we as like the general support person. And then there was also a basic like wellness understanding. Kyle's doing fine. He's, been sleeping. He started to participate in some of the program. That was generally all that check-in was. And then there was an openness with the counselor as well. If you need me at any point, contact me. So I actually did contact our counselor because I wanted to get, or your counselor, because I wanted to get her advice on, how's Kyle doing? I have this news of the fact that I'm pregnant, and how do I do this? Like, is it reasonable to discuss this with him? Where is his head at right now? I don't want to impact his recovery in a negative way, or distract from his recovery. And so that, was very helpful to have someone who was working closely with you to address concerns, I guess you could say.
Yep.
So,
And then this is a detail I actually kind of forgot until sitting down and thinking about it just now, but there was one additional time that you got to come to the facility before I left because we reviewed my discharge plan together. And I've actually covered the discharge plan in a fair amount of detail in one of the podcasts where I go over the contents and exercises from recovery. But really, the discharge planning process was for you to write down and formalize and then communicate out to key relationships. Like, what are the boundaries? Excuse me. What are the boundaries that you're setting when you leave the facility? What are some of the triggers that you need to look for? Like, what are basically providing your close support network with like metrics to measure your adherence to recovery and basically opening the door. I mean, one part of my discharge plan was I asked for you and other members of our family, like, ask me about my AA meetings, ask me about the topics that are brought up, because I knew such a key part of my recovery maintenance after I got out of rehab was honesty and getting rid of the feeling that I had to hide things or just not talk about them.
Yeah, and I'd say one thing that stands out to me in that conversation is I think that you were able to see maybe for the first time that you still had a lot of work to do when you left rehab.
Yeah.
It wasn't like it was a tough conversation. It was like you essentially sitting there in a jury of people were like, well, what did you learn in the last 28 days essentially? And how is this going to play out? And, everyone's coming at it from a place of concern and love, of course, but it was definitely like a reality check of there's still going to be a lot to do once you leave this facility. And it might actually be kind of emotional and kind of more difficult because you're not in the safe confines of rehab.
It was actually a good thing that I did that a few days before actually checking out, because in all honesty, I needed some time to kind of process that and get my head right. And so, like, I don't think it's that big of a deal to share. Like, we were Zooming with our family, both Alyssa's and my family, and just, I had worked on this discharge plan like so hard and so long and for so many days. And I was talking with others in there and like getting ideas from them and sharing my ideas out and just like really feeling like I was refining this plan and setting myself up for success. And then to Alyssa's point, it was such a reality check with regards to the key relationships in your life are struggling to fully trust you, which is totally their right and acceptable. And I had spent so much time focusing on building this plan that I was excited about. It was one of those instances where it's like you put so much work behind something and then it kind of gets dismantled fairly rapidly. Not dismantled, but just like pushed back on. And again, I could just see and really feel that there was trust to work on. And that was the moment for me when I left there. And finally, when I got my head right about it, when I realized like I just have to assume every single relationship is going to change, that came from that experience and doing that discharge plan. But it was kind of funny because I was so happy that you were there in person. The counselor was also there in the room with us. And we concluded the meeting. We shut the video call down. And I just put my head down. And I like took a big, deep breath. And the counselor goes, "Are you okay?" And I was just like, yes, I need a little bit of time. Like that was a lot, but that was like really good to see and go through and honestly experience while I was still in the walls of rehab, because I was able to take that experience back and just sit down and talk. Like I went and I talked to Jeremy after that who was one of my closest friends and he was checking out the day before me, and I told him my experience, and then he was able to reciprocate, and he's like, I had a very similar experience with my wife, and we had worked on those plans together, and we were energetic and enthusiastic about it, but it was very important grounding.
I don't think anything really changed with your plan, truly.
No, it didn't. It didn't.
And I think that you've, there's obviously pieces of the plan that weren't maybe necessary, but like you had put them together. And it's, one of those things where you make, 10 goals, you hit 8 of them, and it doesn't mean necessarily that things didn't go well for you when you left. It just means that like it was more than what you needed to, or
right.
Like some things were you figured out what like truly worked with our lifestyle once you discharged.
Well, one of the examples of that is we had talked about you and I sitting down every single week and going through our finances, because one of the things that I did in my addiction and my behavior was to hide the spending that I was doing on alcohol. And so part of my plan was like, I'm going to keep every receipt every time I have to go to the grocery store, which was planned to be a very rare occurrence, but like
we're gonna do
all online shopping, just drive up and go, and
don't have to go into
which
the store,
we did.
Don't have to see the alcohol.
We stuck to that plan. I would say for like 4 months. I probably went in a grocery store, physically went in a grocery store like 5 times in like the first 4 or so months. And so we did adhere to that part. But it's like, I remember the second time I brought a receipt back and like kept it on the table for you. You got home from work or whatever, and you're just like, Kyle, you can just throw that away.
Yeah.
And you're kind of like, I don't think you need to do that anymore.
Well, my main reason for it being like, if you're gonna hide something, you're not gonna put it on that receipt.
Yeah.
You're still gonna come up with your creative ways of hiding things if you're gonna do it. So like, what's the point of showing me the receipt that matches the information that I'm expecting to see?
Yeah.
And it was also like, I don't know, naive maybe, I don't know. But it's like, I'm just not going to be that dumb next time. I guess is my, or I'm not going to be that oblivious to the scenario next time. And so, like the cards are all out on the table. We're not going back there. And so I think that was it a piece of trust that did that help in any way to have that happen?
Yeah, I mean, having instances like that kind of did show you it's like, okay, there's a step. It might be super small, but there's a step. And another one was when we sat down for these financial reviews for I think a month or so, and then we decided that we would rather spend the time and energy focus on like a relationship style check-in. And so we modified that, and that's one of the items that I'm going to get to about kind of like our practices that we've taken up as a couple. But, we had that shift from like this financial review, which again was supposed to be there to shed light on like a very key manner in which I hid my alcoholism and in which I lied. And so, yeah, all of those things were definite like signals and kind of calls to me or indicators to me that like things are improving. But one of the mindsets that I had was to not feel rushed about it. Like I was very aware that this was going to take time, and I did not feel like there was any sort of deadline looming to win back your trust. And I think a key part was like both of us had a very, very real commitment to our relationship and to growing it and strengthening it. And so I knew that our vision was aligned in that manner, and that if we stuck to that, there was no risk of deviation or really like growing apart or anything like that. And another thing that came out of the discharge planning that you and I did get right into and stuck to, and which the importance of which grew even more after finding out about Lucy, was to do couples counseling.
Mhm.
And we had talked about it, and you had come into some of the counseling sessions that I had over the years, but we had never really sat down, at least not
The
as far as,
focus had never been on me.
yeah, it had never been on you, and it had never been on us too.
Yeah. Yep.
But yeah, do you want to just like talk through your perception of because I didn't know what to expect in going into couples counseling.
So it felt like a good way to, try to take care of two different counseling needs, but do it together in one place. So, I think that, like I started to look at in the first month after you left rehab, I went to Al-Anon meetings for, I don't know, like a month, I would
Do you want
say.
to just explain? I have no idea
Yeah.
what
So
Al-Anon was.
Al-Anon essentially is for anyone who is a support person for someone who is an alcoholic. It follows a very similar structure to an AA meeting, but from the standpoint of the support person and their recovery journey. It is very specific to the fact that as a person who has a close relationship with someone who is an alcoholic, you also have flaws. You also have reason to be in this room of people who are there to support you. And to be honest, it just wasn't for me because I'm not the type of person who can speak up in a group. I'm more of like a one-on-one type of person where I really enjoy a personal conversation, but the group setting's just not for me. I get too nervous and it just it wasn't for me. Also, I was in the third month of my pregnancy, and I was just really sick, and then my work schedule just didn't allow for it either. So I had a couple of different things going against me. So truly, switching over to a couples counseling was a better option. It was a way for me to get the help that I needed. It was a way for us to get help together and for you to get your individual help. We were set up with a counselor or, given direction with that when you were checked out of rehab. And it was okay, but we just couldn't really get on a consistent schedule with that person. And so, as can happen, especially when you're doing remote work, it feels like we just kind of fell off the train with that one. And, we had so much other stuff going on with our daughter at the time that it unfortunately became a lower rung priority. And I mean, we were very focused for the following months.
Yeah, with Lucy, everything
Lucy.
just truly turned to day to day.
And we had a lot of together time through that too.
Yeah.
Like we had so many doctor's appointments. We had a lot of time sitting in waiting rooms. We had a lot of time sitting, waiting for the doctor in our room. And there was time during that where our relationship was already being strengthened. And it was in a different way. It wasn't in a very direct way, obviously, but it was, those parts were there. And then when we moved to Minnesota, we were entering the final months of the pregnancy and given pretty grave outcomes at that point from the doctors. And so that was the point at which we sought out once again another counselor. And we did it in part from a standpoint of grief. We need someone who's going to help us to grieve through this process. And that is how we found the counselor that we are still currently going to. We're able to work remotely with this person. And we did see him in person when we were in Minnesota. And I feel like that really helped us to form a foundation.
It did. Yeah.
And there truly is something to be said about being in person. If we lived in the same place as this person, we totally would, still be going in person for our appointments. But this does tend to work fairly nicely. And truly, we haven't sought out someone new here in returning Because to start over and do the full intake information over
Yeah.
and over again, it feels
It's
like a little bit of a waste of time, especially when we've established a good
right.
relationship with
And
someone.
that was gonna be something I added here. It's a really unfortunate aspect of the industry and just like establishing that relationship. It's hard to find people with space, counselors and therapists with space. And on top of it all, if I talk to anybody about the idea of going to see a therapist or a professional, I have the exact same advice for them as if they were going to an AA or seeking out an AA meeting. It's like you have to shop around until you find the one that just feels right. Like with our counselor that we have right now, they're incredibly talented because anytime that they come into a session with us, they have like this incredible balancing act that they have to read and play off of, because it's like we have the alcoholism to talk about. We have 12 years of a strain on our relationship and kind of the lifting of that, where each of us needs to seek a new identity and establish that, yet we each need to like strengthen the relationship as well. Plus we have the grief aspect and what all went on with Lucy that is tied in that. Plus every once in a while, we will spend a whole session just on general life issues. Like I have been having such struggles with work every once in a while, and I don't intend it, and I don't think we intended going in, but it's like, boy, sometimes it will take a week and just spend quite a lot of time talking about that.
And I think another aspect that we've appreciated with this counselor that we're seeing is that he is a Christian counselor, and that's not necessary, but certainly helps us in ways that other counseling experiences haven't helped us, is to also ground it in, you know, biblical truths and, I don't know, just that side of it as well. I think
Yeah,
it's been really nice for us to have that. It aligns well with our way of moving through this.
Yeah, especially the way they approach it. Like I don't feel like it's overbearing. Like he's not pulling scriptures from memory and like laying that down.
It's not a lecture.
No, not at all. It's just like a nice touch that he usually ends a session with like a story. And it's been extremely helpful. The other big benefit that I've gotten out of counseling is, and this sounds ridiculous, especially Alyssa and I have been together since 2010, so coming up on just passing 14 years. And couples counseling was a way for us to figure out how to open up and talk to each other again, especially for me, just learning how to communicate. Alyssa, like I would say you always pushed for that communication, but I just spent years and years and years shutting myself down. Like this has been an entirely new process for me to figure out and learn. And again, taking the view that like part of my new identity was like seeking the truth and striving to be honest. It's like sometimes like I still would get nervous bringing something up or being honest with you, because it was like I ran from that for so long. And just like that deliberate time together helped open that up. And then it started seeping into the rest of our lives, where it's like, we didn't walk around like we were talking or behaving in couples counseling necessarily, but it just helped bring that aspect in.
Yeah. Yeah. And we haven't been, a couple of things just came to mind as you were talking there. One is that I feel like I learn a lot more sometimes when I listen to you have conversations with other people.
Yeah.
They ask different questions, and because I live with you, I think that sometimes like I get a few of these things by osmosis, but like there are definitely things that I don't pick up on from that. And so I think that having conversation with other, like even, with friends, like we'll be out to dinner or something and it's like, oh, I didn't know that at all. And it kind of looks like on the surface, like, do these two even communicate with each other? And it is, a learned process that we're still going through. But the other thing that just came to mind, we just finished watching The Office. And at the very end of the series, one of the main couples is going through couples counseling and they're talking through all these like, scripted ways of speech that they're supposed to use with each other. And it's like, that's not what our couples counseling has been like at all. It's not like we go around like trying to use these words of affirmation or, anything like that. Like it just hasn't been our experience, which is good because I don't think that we would subscribe to that at all. So.
Yeah. Well, I mean, I think one of the ways it's changed our communication, or at least my perception of it, is like I don't let things fester like they used to. Like if there are things that bother me or are on my mind, I'm not perfect, but I'm getting faster to bring it up instead of letting it build and pressurize. And this sounds super weird to say, but it's like I've lost the fear of bringing those kind of things forward to you. Like I had this fear of like judgment and also like not wanting to hurt you or rock the boat or just like speak what was on my mind. Like I was lying and manipulating so much that it was like par for the course for me to just suppress something or hide it. And that not being the case anymore, I'm much more rapid to like bring things forward or bring things up to you, even if it's nothing to do with you. If it's like, if I'm struggling with work but in some manners or other aspects of life, it's like in some manners, like, or experiences, I'll bring it up to you first before you even say anything.
Yeah. No, I think I definitely would agree. Our communication has shifted. And I think a big part of it, or one thing that comes to mind for me as well, is just the strategy that it takes to be a parent to a 3-year-old.
Oh, yeah.
And, like that is very different from previous years and prior to you going to rehab. Like we had an infant at that point who didn't understand the world around him at all. And he's so much more understanding now that like our roles are very different with regards. And we really do have to be, we're finding we have to be more of a team with each other on certain aspects. Because, we're getting well, Dad said I couldn't do this, so maybe I'll go ask Mom.
Yeah.
And, like those kinds of things are coming up now. And, like that's only going to grow.
I was thinking about that the other day. I couldn't even imagine being in the place that I was before rehab with Grant at this age right now. And it's just like because of the amount of energy and creativity that it's taking for you and I to like get through a day. And I love it. I think the challenge is incredible and it's frustrating at some points, but it really is just this amazing experience. And
I couldn't imagine you missing it.
I know.
I know. Because you'd be checked out essentially.
I know.
Or, like the flip side of that is like if our relationship got to a place where it was not repairable, which I don't think would ever consider, and that would never be a goal of ours. But let's say that was, the alternate reality. Like I can't imagine having to do this by myself. Like it would just be so difficult to not have you. So
yeah, and I kind of want to take that comment and go into like the time period right before I entered into rehab, and just talk about like the way you viewed, I guess, life, but also what your perception of your identity was, because I think this gets into some of the complexities behind like these relationships that are so tight and so important, where addiction is involved, because it was like I'm going to give you my kind of like view of it, just from conversations that we've had in the past, because I'm kind of surprising you with this one. So I'm giving you some time to think. But it's like you held our family together for all of Grant's life up to that point. For many, many years before that, we had to retract and we had to isolate ourselves in a big way, because it's like we couldn't commit to anything, because you never knew where I was going to be in terms of my headspace. And so I would just be curious if you could kind of like trace sort of your work that you've done and some of the shift in perspective and space that you might now have to redefine and kind of pursue, like, what does it mean to be Alyssa Zabrowski in this life and in this world today?
It's a great question. I think it's, it's an ongoing piece of discovery, but to go back to your original question of what was it prior to you entering rehab, and a particular conversation comes to mind for me. And I did not have many conversations like this outside of like with our parents, and it was never maybe this direct because they were not innocent by like what's the word I'm looking for? Like innocent bystander, but not that. Like,
you got me.
Just like a third party, like totally had no opinions on it, no investments in it. And that was with my primary care physician. So I would say like 4 months prior to you entering rehab, or like really, the truth coming out, I suppose, you had an episode, as we were calling them at that time. And this was in December. Your dad had emergently flown out to Boise, trying to help us out, get us, right the ship once more. And at that time, we were calling it mental health, not mental health, a mental condition. And, you got back in with your psychologist or psychiatrist, you we're trying to make some changes in that regard. And like right around that whole time frame, I had my primary care appointment with my doctor. And at that point, I was not taking care of myself physically. I was not getting any time for myself to exercise or making time for myself to do those things. I was not eating very well because I was always stressed out. I was probably at one of my like lightest weights, which, is just a number. But like for me, like there's a health aspect to that too. I don't want to, discount that, like the support person, there is a toll it takes on them. So for me, it was unhealthy. I told her, where I'm having this struggle with my husband, and she looked at me and she said, "It looks like you're wearing the weight of the world on your shoulders and you're just in absolute survival mode right now." And it was like the first time someone had just really straight up said that to me. And it was like, you know what? I am wearing the weight of the world on my shoulders. And it's not like the whole world and all the world's worries, but it's the worries of my household. And it was, it didn't change by her saying that. It just helped me to recognize that, like, this was taking a bigger toll on me than I was maybe like outwardly admitting. And the stress was high. There was a lot of concern over her son, who I wanted to be there more for him, and I wasn't able to be there. And I had to place trust in someone who was struggling and who I knew was struggling, but I loved and loved our child. And so it was very complex. In the weeks prior to going to rehab, there was a point of hopelessness that I had not really reached prior. And I think it was just like kind of for no good reason, just a reality check on myself where it was like, this isn't changing. This isn't getting better. The medication doesn't seem to be working for Kyle. The trust is very low. Our son is becoming more aware, and his awareness is something that really scared me. And I honestly was incredibly relieved and not surprised or anything when we, finally had the night where we went to the ER and, you had alcohol in your bloodstream and it was detected, and it was like, okay, well, now the truth is out there. And, like, I felt like for me, also like I was put in a position of, I was a communicator with our families, and it was really hard to be in that position and to feel like I kind of let everyone else down. Like, this is someone who they all loved, and I hadn't protected you through it. And that was really, really hard for me. And probably, one of the things that I struggled with the most through all of this is that I blamed myself in some ways, and that's very common for that to happen. And why people need to go through counseling and through things like Al-Anon, and that's why those tools are there too, is to help with this side of things. And then we jumped from a codependency with you to a codependency of me pregnant with our daughter. And, there was an identity shift once again. And, we've told that whole story and we don't really need to go back to that necessarily, but I don't feel like I was able to start really thinking about myself and my emotional health, my physical health, my spiritual health, truly until probably February when we returned.
Mm-hmm.
This is like this February. So we're talking like almost a year after you were in rehab.
Yeah.
Um,
And honestly, I think that was part of our push to come back to Boise. Not push, but the feeling that we got and we talked about it. I remember being down in the basement of my parents' house and just kind of admitting it's like, I feel like we have to go back. And like, we just agreed. And yeah, it was much earlier than I ever would have anticipated. But I think you're absolutely right about that. And I kind of want to pull back. You had brought something up, the term codependency, and I had never heard about this until I entered rehab. And I do kind of want to flag it as something like, it's one of those concepts, and it is sometimes overused, especially in this space of recovery, but it's one of those things that, like, when people learn about, they start kind of like over applying or labeling everything or every single relationship that they have as codependent. But like the best way that I have connected with it, and I want to check this with you, is like just this inability for us to step away and have our own defined identity.
I was just listening to another podcast where they defined it really well, so I'm
Okay.
just going to cut you off.
Just use it.
It's essentially where do I end and where do you begin?
Yep.
So it's where is that line?
Yep.
And I know that's not like super clear, but it is a way of measuring it, I would say. And yeah, I think
But the really,
that's any relationship, right? It's
yes,
not just husband, wife.
Correct. The incredibly difficult and oftentimes humbling way that this presents with addiction is, from me to you, it's obvious that like I was pulling you in and had this like dependency. Like I knew that you were holding our family together. But in this weird, and because of that, like, again, your identity started to form, and you started to lose those individual aspects to you because you were being so overtaken and had to focus so entirely on just keeping our family, keeping you and I together. And so this is a weird spot in addiction with relationships, because in some ways, I know individuals who have relapsed, gone back to their drug of choice, because a relationship that they have, the other person, the non-addict, actually didn't know who they were and could not find themselves without that person going to their drug of choice. And so in a really messed up way, that person relapsing was sort of setting the universe back to normal for that relationship, because all of a sudden they got to step back in and assume those roles that had become so comfortable for them before. And I think that's probably like a good way to think about it, is like, there's been a lot of discomfort, even though I'm in recovery and like everything, literally everything in recovery is better. There's still discomfort as like you and I learn how to define ourselves, and then subsequently how to define us as a couple in our relationship.
Yeah. In a lot of ways, like, I was the person providing emotional support or care towards our son, and that's been a shift. Is like, like, Kyle's checked in. He's on dad mode, and it's been amazing. I love watching you play with Grant and listening to your conversation or your banter, whatever it may be. And I'm incredibly grateful for all of it. And sometimes I still get in these modes of like, pinch me. Like, is this, is this truly how things are? Like, this was not life a year and a half ago,
Right.
For us. And, you brought up something else. I forgot to mention this when I was kind of going through all of that, but, we didn't have a social calendar because it was, we were in self-preservation. Like, I
Right.
was in self-preservation mode, like anything to keep up the appearance that this wasn't something we were struggling with. And the easiest way to do that was to keep everyone at arm's length
Yes.
distance.
Right.
And it was hard. Like, I mean, I think back to, oh gosh, I mean, I guess when I was in pharmacy school, but like back when I, in our 20s, and, the things that I did outside of our relationship, they were there. Like, I belonged to a gym. I had friends that I went out to dinner with, or we went shopping, or, you just had time with friends, and you weren't necessarily just focused on being with each other or being there all the time and making sure you were available to support at any given minute. And there was times where I had to, even back then, they were fewer and farther between, but there was times when I had to drop what I was doing and come to your aid. And, those experiences probably, led us down the slippery slope of where we went to between. And so you had another question in there, though, and that was, what's happened now? So let's jump to February.
Yeah.
You return here. I was still postpartum. I was and on maternity leave. So that first month, like, we had started to talk about, like, what does this look like for us physically, emotionally, etc. We continued with our counseling, built physical activity back into our routines. And I would say, like, talked about it more. Like,
Yes.
even doing that, like, held me more accountable, truly. You were already on that track yourself, but has held me more accountable to it. And it's still an ongoing process. Like, I'm not perfect about it every day, but I haven't gotten into places of stagnation, I would say, like I once was in. And I'm not just picking up the pieces every day. I feel like that's one thing that I was doing before is like I was constantly cleaning the house or like, not that I'm some big fix it girl, but like there was, things that got damaged in our home, like little
Mm-hmm.
things. And it would be, just cleaning that out or like, I don't know, just little stuff like that. And just making our home feel more comfortable has been part of it for me. And um additionally, um, I made some changes with my work schedule. And so that allowed me to have more time during the week to devote to household duties so that on the weekends we're able to spend time as a family and
Mm-hmm.
have friends over. And we did that a lot more commonly starting this spring and summer. And just even be there for friends a little bit more. Like I'm still learning and growing through that, but there was a lot of loss of trust in myself that I was even a good friend to other people because I had been so distant from people for a while. And so picking that back up, and then this fall, I have joined a mom group through our church, which has been really great for me from a social standpoint. And it's more than just uh, meeting every couple of weeks. Like there's conversation that happens outside of it. There's get-togethers that happen outside of it, and like truly, I feel um energized from having that time with others. And I think a big part of it too is like, we talk about it. We talk about um the fact that I'm having conversation or like, oh, here's something really great that happened with this today. And I think that, I don't know, maybe it makes you feel good to know that I've got other people in
No,
my life. And like, I think that you've built friendships throughout the years. And there's actually been some like random connections to some of these people too, which has been pretty cool to see. A reminder that Boise is a
pretty small. Yeah.
smaller city than some out there when you make those connections. But no, it's just been really good. And, like it just gets me, maybe dressed for the day, put
Yeah.
together a little bit more and, just taking care of myself more, which has been great. And I think helps to build my confidence back because a lot of this is a confidence piece for me.
Yeah.
And I look back at, like, even last night, I was looking back at pictures of when Grant was a baby. And it's hard to look at some of those photos or even videos. I'm always a little nervous, like, oh, no,
Mm-hmm.
what am I pulling up here? Is this, sober Kyle or not? And I just think like, man, I'm so glad we're not in that place
Yeah.
at this point. Um, if I could go back and change those times so that for you, I would. But there is no going back. So really all we can do is continue to make positive memories going forward here.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. From my perspective, it's been incredibly cool to see you branch out and start. It feels like I'm watching you grow as a partner and as an individual. We were at a walk in honor of infant loss a few weeks back, and it was so neat to see like you step forward and kind of lead and engage with people that you knew from like that mom's group, and just to be a little bit on the side and just sort of watch you. It was really special. And like, I think I kind of know the self chatter that goes on in your head. And so, watching that and like seeing, I can just like, I feel like I've been able to pick up on in social situations, like when you're really in that self doubt or like preservation type mode, or just sort of like wrap up this conversation. And then again, like just thinking about our family and just like protect us. And it was awesome to see you like truly open. And I think it's been such a healthy step for us.
I think a piece of it too is that, I mean, through all this, I think we've become incredibly open about our story and about who we are. And, there's a line you have to walk a little bit with that because you don't want it to be the only thing people know about you.
Yeah,
and
and
don't
you
want to
can
go
overwhelm people sometimes.
But I mean, I'm always just like so open about it. And I think part of it is because of what the work you've done with Chapter 3 Stigma and just seeing some of the results that have come from it, just in your stories of people reaching out to you or, hearing of people sharing it with others and even the small impact that can make on your tens of listeners.
My tens, all 10 of you.
No, truly, whoever is out there listening.
Yeah,
I think
it's been crazy.
It's been neat to see that, and so it gives me courage to be open about our story even more. And I just think that, like, at this point, any friendships that I'm making, like, I don't want to put up any kind of facade in terms of like who I am, and like I am gonna have moments where I'm feeling great and confident, and I am gonna have moments where I'm, maybe feeling a hit of grief or self-consciousness. And I just want to be really open with people about that. And I think that vulnerability so far has been well received. You have to pick and choose who you share with sometimes, just based on like, can you handle this today?
Yeah, I've noticed, a big part of my like pursuit and advancement towards like my identity or refinement of my identity has been, again, like just grounding everything in truth and honesty. One of my learnings in this time has definitely been how to read the person and read the situation for whether or not like you're going to open up about everything that's been going on. It's like sitting over at someone's house that we're well acquainted with and like opening up on the relationship journey that we've been on. Like, yeah, that definitely feels right. Being asked by like a grocery clerk if Grant's the only kid that we have, it's like, yeah, I'm going to throttle that information and honesty a little bit differently. One of the things that has surprised me, like kind of pulling this all back to, again, just like recognizing the journey and the change and the shifts that we've had in these last 18 months. One of the most surprising things to me, and I'm going to ask you this question after, so again, kind of giving you some time to think, but a realization that I had, and I had this fairly early on, but it's really continued to advance, and like I've understood it to a new depth, is how afraid I was of myself and my own potential when I was truly struggling. Like when I would get, say, like 3, 4, 5 weeks of sobriety under my belt back when I was drinking, and things started to feel good, and I found myself in sort of that like goofy and creative and quick thinking frame of mind, I would get fearful. And that's when I would go back to alcohol and I would relapse, and I would like totally reset myself. And I realized as I maintained myself in recovery, and again, I kept my expectations low. Like I seriously questioned myself, can I be 0.01% better in some way today? And when I kept just pursuing that, it's like the changes in me were so significant and so stunning, but I wasn't afraid of it anymore.
What were you scared of?
I was scared of the responsibility that would have to come along with, being more, proving out my further like capabilities. I was scared of having to maintain like that level for my whole life. And I was able to solve that by really focusing on just do the best you can today, and do the best that you can with what you have, with the knowledge you have, with the experience that you have today, and always be willing to learn. And just the way that I talk to myself right now, the manner in which I'm driven, it's this harmony between being driven and being forgiving. And the other thing is just like, Lucy proved to me what we can get through together, and what I can get through, and what our broader family can get through. And I know that there's more suffering and hardship out there and in front of us. And I've said it before, but it's like, we don't get a debts paid notice from God because of what we went through with Lucy. It's like, we have to ground ourselves and pick ourselves back up and be ready for the next thing while enjoying life.
Mm-hmm.
And it's just been proven to me that I'm able and capable of handling it.
Mm-hmm. Were you ever scared that, sorry, I'm turning the question.
You're turning the table, yeah.
Were you ever scared of the fact that if you started to perform really well, it would bring out the lies?
When I was drinking, yes,
Yeah.
Absolutely. Because I knew that I couldn't maintain the cycle and basically improve my performance, right? That was kind of the tie to the increasing responsibility aspect of it. Like when, I stepped up, and like Zach and I started working on a startup together, and that just like cut to the core of my fear while I was going through struggles with work and having this imposter syndrome come in. And it was just like, it did wind up being devastating to me.
So what's your question for me exactly?
Well, my question for you is, what in the last 18 months, and it's virtually going to be impossible, maybe since February of this year when we got back, is there anything that has changed with regards to us, or just life, that has kind of been an unexpected aspect of me being in recovery, of you having the space to explore your identity?
I think we've talked about this before, but it came to mind. Just the amount of time we have.
Yeah, it's crazy. Today's a perfect example.
Yeah, exactly. Like, we're just way more efficient when we're not having to put so much effort onto the negative that you were going through.
We would spend 4 hours on a Saturday talking.
We spend Grant's entire nap
Yeah.
plus talking, and naps are shorter now, but also just like truly the amount of time we have, like at night sometimes, even like I love you. I love spending time with you, but sometimes I'm just like, just go to bed. So
I know.
Alone time to myself, or whatever. Because you get your alone time in the morning.
I get mine in the morning,
and I like to sleep. So, and you like to sleep at night. So it all works out. But I think the time piece of it, and like the ability to have conversation, like sometimes we get, like we've gone out to dinner. I'm like, what are we even going to talk about? We've had so much time to talk here recently. Like, and it's amazing, and I love it. And I think that's like one of the ways we're having to rediscover our relationship is like, what do we have in common? What do we have to talk about? And like, what things do we like to talk about? And that has been, great to, rediscover our relationship, our friendship, and some of those conversations, like not every conversation is great. Like there is an occasional conversation that comes up where a truth is revealed from, the 12 years of struggle. And it sometimes is a hard reality check too. And so, those moments are still difficult, and they still surprise me sometimes. And I think that it is hard to go back and even think about those periods, because we're in such a good place. But it's important for us to still, review those things. And reflect on the reality that was. So that's been something unexpected is our conversation. I think there's a lot of time that I can feel like I didn't mention this before, but like one of the things that I truly enjoy doing is like I really like reading a good novel. And I totally forgot that I like to do that or didn't really like dedicate the time because my brain was just so busy with other things. And
Yeah.
I especially this summer, I took a lot of time to really do that or just like sit outside for a little while, like just slow down. I feel like we're in a lot less chaotic of a space
Yep.
than we once were. And so that's been really awesome. We've, taken a little more time to travel this year, which was something that we, prior to having Grant and really before we even got married, that was something we did regularly. And
Yep.
like, I remember it being brought up multiple times at our wedding about,
Mhm.
how much travel, like we love travel and et cetera. And it's like,
Adventure.
how many times have we flown an airplane for fun in the last couple
Yeah.
of years? Like we've seen, we have done some very fun things, but it just has been either fewer and farther between, or just there was a level of stress that was associated with it that feels like it's been stripped away at this point, which is wonderful. And then really just building relationships together with our friends and individually with others as well, and all of that. So that's all been really, really wonderful stuff.
Yeah, and I have one in closing that is going to seem very silly, but it happened this morning and it's fresh. And I don't think you even maybe realize like how important it is to me. You're laughing, but I want to hear.
I think I know what you're going to
Okay,
say.
let me hear. Let me hear your guess.
My guess is that, so I decided to make French toast this morning, and you would normally push back on something like that, and you didn't. You were like, yeah, let's do it. Let's have French toast. And usually your response would be, no, I'm not going to eat any breakfast because that's like not something that's healthy, yada, yada, yada.
Okay, it's French toast adjacent, but it's not related to the French toast. Hold on though, on the French toast comment, I have bumped up my how many carbs I'm eating.
Okay.
So like I've kind of chilled out about
Yes,
that. I don't
okay.
know if you've picked up on it. No, but the thing was, in preparation for making the French toast, you go, Kyle, we are out of syrup. Do you think you could run to the grocery store and get us syrup? When I was struggling with alcohol, I would think of any and every excuse under the sun to go and do a grocery store run for onesie twosie like BS items. Like we're out of shredded cheese, we're out of yogurt, we're out of eggs. And when I would do that, especially or most often when I was coming down off of a bender, it was so I could buy a can or two of something and drink it to stave off the effects of detox.
Mm-hmm.
And again, what we talked about at the beginning with the discharge planning, like there was a boundary that we built around going to the grocery stores and then finding ourselves now in a place where you feel comfortable and I feel comfortable, where it's like, hey, I'm just going to off the cuff go to the grocery store and get these few items.
And funny you say that because you actually brought up the fact that you like almost accidentally ended up in the alcohol aisle and didn't even realize it because like it wasn't your intention at all.
Right.
So
yeah, and again, just being able to like, I don't know, have that trust. It's such a little signal of like a small bit of trust gain, but still 18 months later, it is so meaningful to me. Like I wouldn't call this morning a milestone, right? With regards to like gaining trust back, but it's a signal. It's a data point you shouldn't ignore.
And it wasn't something where like, I'm going to sit and look at my phone. This is what I used to do.
And track.
Look at my phone. Okay, he left at 9 a.m. and it's 9:25 and he's still not home,
Right.
which you did take longer at your grocery run this morning. And you told me when you got home it was to buy stuff for, supplies for sandwiches because you're going to go hunting.
Mm-hmm.
And, those pieces of it and the honesty that comes with that is incredibly important. And it is like, yes, it is a small thing, but it's a small thing that was a really big thing.
Yes.
For a really long time.
That's a perfect way of putting it.
Thank you.
You're wonderful.
And I mean, to just, I guess, go off of that, like last weekend we went for a weekend getaway with a bunch of our friends from college. And, there was alcohol at the house where we were. And they were all very respectful. Is it okay if we, have this? And, we do not want to be a problem for your household. But if it's okay, we'll have some. And it was okay with us.
Mm-hmm.
And the whole weekend, like, I mean, I think I checked in with you a couple of times because you had to go grab your Spindrift out of the same refrigerator where the other drinks were. And it was, are you okay? Like, or everyone's having margaritas. Like, are you okay? And
the way I took you asking, are you okay, was like, is it okay that like all the drinks are in the garage fridge together? And it's like, yeah, it doesn't bother me. I didn't perceive you asking, are you okay? Like, are you on the brink of breaking?
No. And that's not what I was saying at all. I was more so like, are you annoyed that you have to go look at this stuff?
No.
Or, anything like that. And I mean, truly, it doesn't get to you.
Yeah. No.
It gets to me more than it gets to you, I swear.
I think
like
it does.
We watch TV and like a beer commercial comes on and I'm like, close your eyes, don't look at this. And for you, you're like, it doesn't even apply to me at this point. Or that's what you've said.
Exactly. It's like the menopause pills.
Yeah.
I can recognize what they're advertising, but it's just like it truly feels like it doesn't apply in my life. I think in closing, reflecting back on what will soon be 18 months to what is whatever today, 17 months and 20 odd days. I think the biggest thing that you did for yourself and for us and for me was to allow for me to put my recovery first. And I think we aligned and talked about this a lot early on, but we recognize that if I don't prioritize the things that are needed for me to maintain myself on the road to recovery, then everything else falls apart. Everything else that we dream of, everything else that we desire in life, it goes away if I don't do the work.
I think I also hold you accountable for putting your recovery first.
Yes, you do. If
there's a day where you're not going to AA, I question, and it's one of your regular days, I question it.
Yep.
Say, why aren't you, what happened this morning? And it's, there's usually...
Well, usually I communicate it early on. It's like, hey, I have a, 7 a.m. call tomorrow. I can't go to my meeting, but I'm going to try to go Friday. Or, my normal meetings are Tuesday, Thursday. And I have other things that I do. Like AA is one part of my program. It's very important one, but I have, as I've talked about on the podcast before, it's like I have what I call my practices. It's movement, gratitude, vision, spiritual connection, and community. And like I focus on those items every single day.
Yep.
And you're aware of that. And so you check in and
and sometimes you just, like you said, you preemptively check in. So like,
yep.
Like, oh, I didn't have time to do my workout this morning. I'm doing it at 3:00 when I get done with my work day. And you're forgiving of yourself if for whatever reason something comes up and you can't do it. Let's say Grant's, sick or whatever, and you have to go pick him up. Like, it's okay, you move your workout.
Yep.
It's okay if you miss one day.
Right. No, it's been, obviously we've said it before, as you've been on with me, and it's been an incredible and quite literally unbelievable journey. But I thank you for being there every step of the way and for being such a foundational part of our family and relationship. And I admire your growth so much. And I without a doubt love you more and admire you more today than I ever have
You're making me blush.
before. Yeah. It's probably just the heat that the fire's putting off right now.
We have a nice toasty fire going by us here. I think a final point that I'd like to mention too, and early on we said, like, what do the family aspects look like of this, and I think that we've seen the subtle changes in that regard too. Like, I can't speak for others, but I've seen the shift with other relationships in your life, both
Mhm.
family and friends.
Mhm.
And it's pretty special to see that too. And I just want you to be aware of it. And
Yep.
I know you are, but I think it's good to hear from another person
Mhm.
as well. And just that your changes are recognized.
So
Loved.
what do you want to go on a date or something next week to celebrate?
I know,
we
we
should
need
probably
to.
do something.
We should. Yeah. So you'll have a new chip that you get.
Yep.
Next week, which is
Yep.
exciting. Day to day, right?
Yep.
So that's the anticipation is that Thursday you'll get your chip.
Yep.
And you get to speak again at your meeting. Do you know what you're going to say?
No.
Okay, for you, so I think
It will not be a 1 hour, 15-minute.
Well, we said this
rambling
episode was
podcast.
going to be 30 minutes.
Yeah.
long.
Yeah. That 30-minute mark was good.
Yeah.
All right.
Yeah. All right.
Love you.
I love
Love you very much.
I love
Love you all listening. Thank you for following along.
If you enjoyed this podcast, share it with others or give us a rating on your channel of choice. My hope is that my story can help others in their struggles with addiction or any other aspects of life that they feel could be bettered. You can follow us on social media at Chapter 3 Stigma on Instagram and YouTube. I cannot solve your problems for you, but I can listen. If you want to reach out with a message through one of those channels, I will respond and let you know that you are not alone. All the best, you are loved, and life is worth every struggle and bit of suffering you have to endure. Until next time, all the best.